everyone, today we're going to take a look at Giants from Madagot or Madago Games. I'm never entirely sure how to pronounce that. And as you can hear, there's a lot of stuff in this box, and that's sort of a calling card of the different games that Madagot produces. They love games with really intricate components that look really awesome when you lay them out on the table. I am very happy with a lot of different Madagot games. I love Komet. I love they were involved in Takenoko, I think, which is a really great game as well. Origin, a newish game that I enjoyed so much, is like a great gateway game with really cool little pieces. And Giants is actually, I believe it's out of print. It's back from 2008, and you can tell that games like Origin were definitely influenced by what what Madagot did with Giants. Definitely see that influence there with the different size pieces and things like that. And well, I'm beating around the bush, but what this game is about is actually you're playing tribes on Easter Island who are building the Moai statues that Easter Island is so famous for, and trying to put them around the island and get victory points for being the tribe that built the most of them in the best way, and putting these intricate headdresses on them, things like that. So seems like a very thematic game. Lots of nice pieces, as Madagot is known for. Let's go ahead and do an overview, and we'll come back and I'll let you know whether it lives up to the other games of Madagots that I like. Okay, I'm going to do a very brief overview of Giants because there are a lot of little rules to this game, and the rule book is not very helpful, so it can be a little bit confusing. I'm just going to gloss over it quite quickly just to give you a flavor of the game. Now, the theme is that you are primitive tribe members on Easter Island trying to construct the famous Moai statues. You're going to try to build them out on these areas here together with your own custom little monument marker here. And when the first person runs out of their tribe markers, which is going to vary depending on the number of players in the game, that's going to signal the end of the game, and whoever has the most victory points is the winner. There's a victory point track around here with these tiny little victory point markers. Now, how you're going to get points mostly is from building statues of different heights, putting them on different areas, but also by putting these headdress monuments on it. But that's easier said than done. First, you need to build the statue, then you need to start moving it across the island to a different spot, then you need to build the headdress, and then you need to move that over to the appropriate statue. And there are different indicators on just how many points you're going to get based on where you build it. So, for example, if you were to put a statue over here, you're only going to get 1 point times the height of the statue. The statues come in 3 different heights. This is the biggest one. This one that I just had in my hand is the smallest, and then you have the medium-sized statues here. So you have basically sizes 1, 2, and 3. That number, the size of the statue, is going to be multiplied by the black number here on the board, and then you're going to add points if you were able to build a headdress. So here, where there's only a 1 and a 12, I know it's hard to see, I apologize, you would only get 1 times the height of the statue plus 12 points if you build a headdress on it. Whereas if you go all the way over to this side of the map, you get less points for putting a headdress on it, but more points for putting the statue there. That's because when you're actually placing the statues and the headdresses on the board, headdresses start here, Moai statues start here, and they move out from there. So hence, you get more points for moving statues all the way over here than you would over here. More points for putting headdresses on statues all the way over here than you would over here. Got it? That's basically how the scoring is going to work in this game. But another interesting aspect of scoring is that when you move the statues out, or the headdresses, you have to move them by using little workers that you put on the board. This is essentially a worker placement game. And as these statues are moved, by the way, this is the first player marker. It's a very confusing choice. I don't know why they made the first player marker look exactly like one of the small statues with a headdress on it, but this headdress does not come off. So if you do get this game, don't make the mistake of trying to rip this off when you first see it in the box. In any event, when you're moving the worker across, if you only use your own workers, when you move the statue across, if you only use your own workers to move it, great, no problem. You know, it just moves there and you got it. But if you use other people's workers, like let's say that they were putting them there either just by chance or on purpose, you don't have to use their workers when you're moving a statue, but if you do, they gain victory points. They don't take your victory points, but they gain their own victory points. So the more the statues move around and use other people, you get victory points that way as well. Now, let's back up a bit and talk about how the actual phases of the game work. So first and foremost, you're going to determine what moai are out here in this little quarry tile. So you'll have these dice, and again, you're going to roll a number of dice that are going to be equal to the number of players in the game, or will be decided by how many players are in the game. You'll roll all those, and depending on what comes up on the dice, that's how many statues you take out of the game box, which is off camera. So if I was to roll a 1, I would take one of the 1 statues. If I roll a 2, I take the 2, the medium statue, etc., etc. At the beginning of the game, you have to make, even the 0 that comes up on the die at least counts as a 1, and you don't get any 3 statues. But as the game goes on, it's possible that you'll roll 0s, and you won't get any statues, or you'll get less than the maximum amount of statues. In any case, you'll lay out the statues here, and then you go into the auction phase. Now, each player is going to have a little tribe marker in their color. And I know the terminology can be confusing. What exactly is a tribe marker as opposed to these? So just kind of bear with me. But these tribe markers are used for a few different things. In this phase, they're used for bidding. Now, when you decide that you want a statue, you're going to basically hold out your 2 hands, and in one hand you're going to have how many of these tribe markers you want to bid. If you use them now, everything that gets used goes in front of your screen, and you're not able to use it for the rest of the rounds. You only get it back at the start of the next rounds. What these tribe markers will do is that if you win the bid by having more of these, you're going to get to choose first. That's the only benefit these have. But in order to build one of these, you need to also put workers into your other hands. Now, normal tribe members are for normal tribe members, you're going to need 1 per the size of the statue. So if you only want one of the little guys, you only need to put 1 worker in your other hand. If you want to build a medium statue, you need 2. If you want a big one, you need 3. However, you do also have the chief markers, which I put back over here. Like, this is the chief for the blue tribe, and to their credit, they actually made them look different for each of the different colored tribes. But he will actually count as 3, both for when you're trying to build something and for when you're moving them as well. They get to move a level 3, so you don't have to put him in your hands. Whereas the sorcerer, who is somewhere over here, he looks a little bit different than the rest of them in any event. Oh, here he is. The sorcerer only counts as 1 worker for this spot and for moving them, but he has special powers that we'll get into later. So you have, if you want to take a statue, you have to have the appropriate worker in your hand. Everyone shows at the same time. You don't have to bid anything if you don't want, and you might still have a chance to grab one at the end of the auction phase. But in any event, once you get a statue, you'll put it in front of your board, and that's that. That's the end of the auction phase. Then we go on to the placement of figurines, which we would call worker placement. So starting with the first player who has the stupid first player marker, you're going to go in turn order putting down some of your workers. And this can do a few different things. Now, if you're only trying to set yourself up for moving some of the moai statues out, then you're going to kind of decide where you're trying to go to as far as these different monument sites, and then you'll just in turn order put your workers out. Each regular worker can move a level 1 statue. If a chief can move up to a level 3, a sorcerer only counts as a normal worker for moving statues, and people can double up on spaces as much as they like. Also, and I'll explain this more in a moment, but if you happen to have these little wooden logs, when you put one of the workers out, you can combine them together with logs. You can put them out at the same time, and they also count as an extra 1 for the purposes of trying to move bigger and badder statues. So that's one thing you can do. Now you can also take sorcerer actions. I mentioned that the sorcerer is special. Well, there's special spots on the board where he can go and do something a little bit different. So for instance, if he goes here to this space, which is called the sorcerer's hut, he's gonna let you take another one of your tribe markers. So you can gain more and more of your tribe markers. Conversely, if he goes over here to the village, he's going to be able to let you take more of your workers. You'll get these permanently and be able to use them right away, as a matter of fact. If he goes to one of these forest hexes, you're going to flip that hex over and you immediately get that many of the wooden logs. Of course, in the beginning, you're going to want to go for whatever the highest one is that's still left, but those never refresh. They're like that for the rest of the game. You may also go to reserve and Ahu. Now, when you're next to, if you move a moai statue next to one of these spots eventually, and you have a worker of your own color there, you're able to immediately put down one of your little monument markers and build the statue. But of course, it's kind of a race, because some people might want the spot that you want. So if you want to reserve it ahead of time, you can place your sorcerer there, put one of your markers there, and boom, it's yours. No one can ever take that. When you do eventually build a statue there, hopefully, you just build it on top, flip it over, it's yours. I will mention at this point that there's kind of a little bit of memory here, because as more and more statues come out, you have to flip your marker over, your little monument marker over after you build a statue on it, and you must remember on your own whether or not that's your monument marker or not. If it's not, you could accidentally build on someone else's marker, which would give them the points. You only get the points for having a statue built on your marker, but there is a little workaround which I'll get back to in a moment. And finally, you can try to, or I should say not finally, but you can also use the sorcerer to try to sculpt a headdress. So put the sorcerer over here, and he will make a headdress that you can immediately put in front of your screen, and later on we will put it out just like a Moai statue. Also during this turn, you can use, if you put your chief down, which I said you can put down like a normal worker, you can spend one of these Rongo tablets, a full one. The tablets come in halves, and so as you grab different halves, you'll combine them together in front of your screen. Everyone can see them. You can choose to do a sorcerer action with the chief if you sacrifice one of your Rongo tablets. And how do you actually get these half tablets? Well, that's the other thing you can do during this phase. If you have any of your little tribe markers left over, as one of your actions going in turn order, you can sacrifice one for the rounds in order to take half of the tablet. Those tablets are going to be worth points at the end of the game, and like I said, they can also give you a special ability. Once you get done with that phase, in other words, everyone either passes or doesn't have any actions they can take, and if you pass, this is the marker that you put on your screen over here, then we get on to the movement phase, which is where you actually put your Moai out into this special quarry zone here, and then you could either move them or mark them. Now, this is very important because you'll have these little hats, and that are also your tribe markers, that you can put on top. It's very difficult at times, but you can put them on top of the Moai statues that you have, and you claim them as your own, meaning that once they're marked like that, only you can move them. And you can do the same thing with the headdresses, I believe. This is important because if you don't mark them as your own, that means that other players can just take them at their will. So it's important that you can mark it as you put it out and just move it, but you don't want to leave it there too long. But sometimes you may not have enough tribe markers for what you want to do, in which case you will. But if there's a lone statue out there, someone can just come along and take it. Same thing with the headdresses. In any event, like I said before, you can move statues over workers, either your own or someone else's, but in that case they get points, and try to put them over on the monument marker. If you have your own worker there, you can immediately build it. Same thing with the headdresses. The headdresses will start from here, and then they will move out. You can, if you have a worker next to a spot where a statue is already built, you can put the headdress on top of the statue, and then at the end of the game, this isn't going to stay, I'm not going to bother to try, you're going to get more points. Now, that's basically the game, to be honest. You just try to put the statues out, try to do it in the most efficient way possible to get the most points possible. Try to get Rongo half tablets because those will be worth points as well. And you want to make sure that you put your guys out where they need to be, and try to be the last one to place one of your monument markers, unless you're just trying to end the game as quickly as possible. That's Giants. I glossed over a lot of little details, but that's basically the game. Giants is a sort of point crunching Euro worker placement game, and I don't always dislike games like that. In fact, some games like that, especially some of the games from Stefan Feld, I actually like quite a bit. So that wasn't necessarily an automatic turnoff for me. I mean, actually, when I first saw the game and compared it to other games from Madagot, I didn't really know the game was going to be like that. I didn't think it was that it was going to be a heavy Euro, and I think some people would disagree with me that this isn't that heavy of a Euro, and maybe compared to some games like that new game Madeira, it's not. But I do think it's heavier. I definitely would not recommend this as a gateway game by any means, and the rulebook does not help that. The rulebook is awful. Awful, awful, awful. I think Madagot has definitely improved with other games that they've done. It's just really irritating the way it's laid out. They have all these examples over on the side of the page, which actually, a lot of the times you only go to an example as a reference. Like, oh, I don't understand what this rule is. Let me look at the example that they give. In this rule book, there's very important information in the examples. The main rules say, please look at the example to see what we're talking about. That's terrible. And sometimes, what's even more irritating, there's very important information that is separated from the main text of a rule section and put in italics. Like, it's like very important, but again, because of the way the rules are laid out, your eyes kind of wander over it. So there were many, many times in this game where we had to constantly refer back to the rules, find out we were doing something very, very wrong, and that is just awful and irritating. I play a lot of different new games that we have to learn on the fly. I don't always have time to read a rule book ahead of time, but I've never had quite as much of an issue doing that as with this game. So big fail on the rule book. Now, the game itself, component-wise, beautiful. It absolutely lives up to all of Madagod's other games. Love the little moai statues. Some of them, the sculpting on them is kind of uneven, but I expect that. I love it. It just looks so beautiful. Just like their other games, once it's all set up and you've been playing the game for a while, just looking at the board, walking by, it just looks awesome. So no complaints there whatsoever. Well, okay, I will give one complaint about the first player marker, which is it's designed to look like one of the other smaller statues with a headdress glued onto it. First off, it's annoying that it's not differentiated, so it mixes in with the stuff that you have in front of your screen if you happen to be the first player. And second, I'm sure that I'm not the only person that immediately saw it in the box and said, oh, look, one of the statues has a headdress on it by accident, and tried to pry it off and found out that you couldn't. They even had to put it in the rule book, so obviously people had a problem with that. So that's kind of irritating. The little logs are also too small and they're rolly, so they tend to roll off the map and potentially off the table. I think they would have been better off with cubes, even if they didn't look as cool. So, but I don't know. Those are kind of minor complaints. Everything on the component end looks really, really stunning and great. The gameplay. To me, this was a very disappointing game. Like I said, this is essentially a puzzly, point-crunching game. It's, you know, and that can be fine, but I think that for a game that's supposed to be so thematic and, you know, very cool looking, that it just it's like a disconnect there. Because essentially, you know, this is worker placement, and you're trying to maximize the efficiency of where you go and what you do with the limited amount of workers available to you. But combined, there's just too many little tiny rules. And the way that the turn structure goes is just too confusing. What ends up happening is that the whole game just feels like kind of a big mess to me. It never feels fluid. It never feels intuitive. What you're supposed to be doing, what the best way to maximize your points are. And I'm sure that people are going to disagree with me here, and that this game is meant for heavy Eurogamers will love a lot of aspects of this game. I've only played it twice. Maybe people will probably tell me you need to play it more times to figure out the best efficient way to maximize your points, but to me, that's a chore. And that's kind of what this game felt like, was a chore. It's also very possible that you can know at a very early point that you are going to be knocked out of contention and then be eliminated, which is another thing I hate in games. Also, I think that the time for this game is a lie on the box, which a lot of boxes do, but 60 minutes, no way. Maybe with 2 players, but then again, I wouldn't even recommend this game with 2 players. So that's an issue right there. This game can be very long, especially with the maximum player count, which I don't recommend at all. So that's a problem. And because it's so long at times, combined with that whole morass of rules, man, it's just hard to have fun with this game. You have these different things about bidding, and but you have to bid your workers and your tokens at the same time, but the tokens only really mean you get to choose first, and that's awkward. And then you go around again, and people can still get statues even if they didn't bid, if they're still available, and that's kind of confusing. And then you get down to workers, and it's like, okay, Sorcerer can go here and get a special action, and that's cool, but he can also count as a worker. And that's not always made clear, too, because sometimes they refer to a worker in the rulebook, and it also counts as a sorcerer. And then, even once you have that figured out, the chief can also act as a sorcerer if you break the tablets, and you're also trying to collect the tablets. And the worker can be placed with logs, and logs will give you more. I mean, there's just so many annoying little things to keep track of as far as how the movement goes. And first, everyone goes around and places all their workers, and then everyone goes to the movement phase, and you can either move a statue or claim a statue. There's so many annoying little things that I felt could have been streamlined. I guess what I'm confused about is what their intention with this game was. I don't know that it's heavy enough to be considered a heavy Euro game, but it's too heavy to be considered a gateway game, which for a game that looks so spectacular would have been a great idea. I really think they went in the wrong direction with making this game streamlined and easy to understand instead of going in the other direction of this. And I don't know. The word that comes to mind when I think of this game is clumsy. It's clumsy. It doesn't live up to the standards of the games that they've produced in the future, but maybe that's part of the problem. Maybe this game definitely did not set the world on fire, although I'm sure it has its devotees. And I think that Madagod has learned some lessons from this, hopefully. And that's why games like Comet are just so phenomenal. And even Origin. I think Origin is probably what this game, Giants, could have been as far as easy to understand, easy to get into, still strategic and looking beautiful. And unfortunately, they just, in my opinion, they didn't get it right this time, which is really a shame. But that's Giants from Madagot. Can't recommend it, but I'm sure some people will really enjoy it. But what can I say? My name is Nick. This has been Board Game Brawl, and I'm reminding you to get out there and game every day and everywhere. Take care.